when we opened Blender for the first time, you saw essentially that on the lower part we have what is called essentially a timeline. And as I scrub through it by clicking here and dragging, you will see these numbers change. So these are not seconds, they are frames. And the way to actually animate things is to record the change by recording the initial and the last position. And to do that, I will go on frame 1. My cube is there. And I will press I for insert a keyframe. And you will see that a rhomboid, a small diamond has appeared there. And what I want to do now is I want the cube to go here, rotate, rotate, scale. So I change it. But here's the problem now. The mistake I did is that I didn't change the keyframe. So I'm still in keyframe number 1. So if I click on it and try to jump, it goes back to its recorded position. So what I'll do is I'll go back to frame 60 and do it all over again. So remember always, first change the frame and then record your keyframe. So while I'm here, I then again record with an I for the keywords insert keyframe. Yeah. And then I'll take it again to 120 to keep it consistent. And place it over there. And scale it, rotate again, and I. So let's see what we've done. If I play the animation, you will see that gradually the cube essentially moves and changes and then stays between these positions. Okay? And you might want to go, well, we're fashion designers, why do I care about animation? Well, it's very useful actually to generate all kinds of other stuff by recording the change. So I'll just start, well, actually I won't start a new file, I'll just keep this one, but change my cursor there. And I'm going to add a plane. It's a little bit higher than the cube, so grab it, move it almost in the same level. Enter edit mode. Scale it in edit mode, and then I want to generate more geometry, and you'll see later why. And I'll do it by right-clicking and selecting subdivide. And that kind of immediately creates the loops and the cuts I need, so that I have a much more detailed geometry. So while I have this, I will go now to the modifier stack. As you probably remember what we did with arrays maybe. And I will choose to go into generate or with the mirror one. And I'm looking for one that is called a wave. I can't find it here. So I'll go search wave. And it's in the deform category. So if you can't find a modifier, but you kind of remember the concept, try to describe it in the search function. So I'll add a wave. And kind of something happens, but it doesn't really look like a wave. But let's try and play this. And you'll see that essentially an animation has already been applied to the object. And you see also that if I leave the animation going until the 250th frame, you see my animation is now start 1 and 250. So that's about 10 seconds for those of you that are good with math. If I do 250 by 25 divided by 25, I get 10. And what I can do is I can essentially go to one of the frames and select essentially the desired position and freeze that. But before I go there, I want to play a little bit with a modifier. So first off, I can change the height, right? So I can deform. So imagine if that was a piece of clothing, I can make it a little bit more rough and deformed in terms of what I'm trying to do, yeah? I could also change the width of the wave. And the narrowness. And start position, right? So I could actually start by selecting actually another object or the X and Y, right? So I can change how the wave actually behaves in terms of where it starts from. So you see now it starts minus 10 meters over there, right? So I'll put the cursor 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It starts somewhere there and then propagates through space to reach my object. That's why in the beginning, when I play the animation, it doesn't immediately begin. But when I take it to 0, 0, which is the cross-section of the X and Y axis here, the effect was already really close. And I can play also with the speed and the time. Okay? So animation and modifiers is a really powerful tool that can create form for you. Obviously, you can also use it to animate your clothing, animate a character that wears your fashion items, right? And we'll see really simply a little bit the process of how you might be able to do that, even though it goes on making you an animator rather than a fashion designer. And the other thing I can do now is I can go and say, well, I really like, for example, this part, the wave being like this, the plane being like this. So I will actually apply, well, first of all, I'll apply the whole thing. And then the modifier disappears, but what happens is my plane is now permanently transformed by using that wave. We kind of understand this? A little bit. You need to play with it first. Let's try a little bit more other keys and other modifiers actually. I'll move this out of the way. I have a new cube. And I will also add select the cube, Shift S to take cursor to selected. So my cursor is on the cube. And I will Shift add what is called an empty. So an empty is an object that doesn't have any geometry. And these are just forms that it has, right? So I'm going to go with plane axis. You see it appearing here. And if I remove the cube from your view, you'll see 3 axes appearing where the cursor is. So let's take it onto wireframe so you can see the empty. And we're going to do this. We're going to add an array. So an array creates ordered copies of objects. And I'm going to go with 11. So what happens here is the array modifier creates 11 copies, which are relatively offset by one length of the cube. I could actually make it constant by going with 2 meters, and I get the same result, right? So this is absolute constant offset in terms of distance. So if I go 2.5 meters, whereas the relative offset is actually relative to the object. And if I go 0, it does create 11 copies, but I can't see them. They are all in the same place. Okay? Oh, I shouldn't have done that. So, and you can actually animate the creation of the count. So you could actually have things grow out of it. So imagine this is a piece of cloth, and you create a piece of fabric or fashion item, and you create essentially copies of it. So I could at frame 1 have that at 1. So I only get 1 copy, and I go insert keyframe here, that's the position, and animate also the count. And then I will also then change the X factor here. So I will animate that as well. I haven't changed anything. I just recorded in frame 1. Those are my numbers. And then I'll move now to 120 and go here and change those to 11 and these to 1. And I will then insert keyframe again, insert keyframe again. So let's see what happens. So one method is I'm animating the cubes, right? I arrive there, and I'm very happy. Now, what I could do as well is I could make what we call a parent and child relationship. So let the empty control the cubes. The way to do that is by clicking on Object Offset and connecting these. But I'll do that in a new copy so you don't get confused. So cube. Shift A, add another empty. And what I'm going to do here now is I will add the array modifier and connect the object offset to the empty 001. What does that mean? It means that when I select the empty and I move it, the copies of the cube take the transformation of the empty as a way forward. So if I go here and go 11 and I move it or rotate it, I get to create really interesting stuff. And I could, for example, now, instead of playing with the cube, I will just animate the empty. So position 1, insert keyframe, position 120, rotate, let's try and make it look like a sleeve, and then scale and insert again. So you see now I have 3 animations running together, right? One is changing one cube, the other one is generating copies, and I'm also handling them by essentially modeling with this. And obviously, you don't need to animate everything, right? So I sometimes do it in the sense that I can record essentially where things are, because I could just use the basic structure of how the objects are related to create really interesting stuff. So here, for example, I can take the cube, and by clicking on merge, I can essentially start merging these copies together when they are very close. So that's another way for you to create, for example, a sleeve. I mean, it's very geometric, or if you're making an octopus, one of the feet, or any other kind of object, right? If I didn't have a cube, I could actually use just a loop to create a sleeve with the array modifier, and so on and so forth. Now, the beauty of it is that you get, if I go to modifiers, you get all of these. So we'll try to see some of these today. You get the deforms, so you can play with them. I won't go too much into the normals, and you also get physics, which we're going to see in the next video, right? So you're going to play first with the array modifier, and then we're going to see physics, because it can help us with clothing. You see there is one that says cloth, and we're going to see also particles with which we can generate fur or other kind of particle-like objects, like hair and so on and so forth, okay? So for now, what I want you to do is I want you to play with either the wave or the array modifier by using one new object. So start a new file. Don't play with the one that you did the fashion modeling on. And just try to be as playful as possible, also taking a look at the animation functions.